James Madison is often called the father of the Constitution.
Wanted transparency in government. He introduced the Bill of Rights.
He was 5 feet 4 and never weighed 100 pounds.
James Madison is really the architect of our founding ideals.
He was the shortest president in American history at just 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed barely 100 pounds. But James Madison's impact on the United States was anything but small. Known as the father of the Constitution, he shaped the foundation of American democracy with a pen and intellect. This video dives into the remarkable life of the man behind the Bill of Rights, his quiet genius, and the legacy that still defines the United States today. Stick around to uncover surprising truths, pivotal moments, and how Madison's ideas continue to influence the world centuries later. James Madison was born on March 16, 1751, in the quiet countryside of Port Conway, Virginia. As the eldest of 12 children in a prominent planter family, Madison grew up on the vast Montpelier estate in Orange County, where the rhythm of plantation life was matched only by the constant hum of political discussion. From an early age, Madison's world was shaped by privilege and frailty. Sickly and often confined indoors, his father arranged for private tutors rather than risk his health at school. But what Madison lacked in physical strength, he more than made up for in intellect. In 1769, he ventured north to the College of New Jersey, what we now call Princeton, where he immersed himself in languages, science, and political philosophy. He finished in just 2 years, staying on to continue his studies under the renowned Reverend John Witherspoon. By 1772, Madison was back in Virginia. Just as the storm clouds of revolution gathered, he stepped into the fray, not with weapons, but with words and ideals. Elected to the local committee of safety and named a colonel in the militia, he saw more action in political chambers than on battlefields. In 1776, he took his place at the Virginia Convention, forging bonds with Thomas Jefferson and lending his voice to the formation of a new constitution. His fingerprints were all over the push for religious liberty, a cause he would champion for the rest of his life. Though he faced early setbacks, such as losing an election to the Virginia Assembly in 1777, his intellect kept him in demand. As part of the Governor's Council, he became Virginia's liaison to France, shouldering the delicate work of wartime diplomacy. By 1780, Madison was serving in the Continental Congress, and upon returning home 3 years later, he led the fight for the separation of church and state. But it was in 1787 that Madison would confront his greatest challenge yet, helping to shape a national government from the fractured remains of revolution. The result would be nothing less than the United States Constitution. In 1787, James Madison arrived in Philadelphia as one of Virginia's delegates to the Constitutional Convention, but he brought more than just representation. He came armed with a vision. A committed Federalist, Madison believed the young nation needed a strong central government to survive. His Virginia plan laid the groundwork: a tripartite system with executive, legislative, and judicial branches, each designed to balance and check the others. While the convention included many voices, it was Madison's thoughtful structure that quietly guided the formation of the U.S. Constitution. Still, not everyone embraced this new framework. Opposition simmered, especially back in Virginia. Determined to see the Constitution ratified, Madison joined forces with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay to write the Federalist Papers, a series of eloquent, persuasive essays that appeared in New York newspapers defending the new charter. Back home, he skillfully outmaneuvered anti-federalists like Patrick Henry to ensure Virginia's support. The Constitution, at last, had the momentum it needed. By 1789, Madison had taken his seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, a body he had helped imagine years earlier. But his next mission was even more personal: to ensure that individual liberties were protected under the new Constitution. That summer, he proposed a series of amendments that would become the Bill of Rights. Safeguards for freedom of speech, fair trials, and protection against government overreach. Though the language was refined through heated debates, Madison's principles endured. However, his early alliance with President George Washington began to crack. Madison clashed with Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton over economic policy, suspecting Hamilton's plans favored wealthy Northern elites. Alongside Thomas Jefferson, Madison co-founded the Democratic-Republican Party, challenging the Federalist vision and advocating for a more agrarian and decentralized America. Worn down by political battles, Madison stepped back in 1797 and returned to Montpelier with his new wife, Dolly, an outgoing, charismatic widow with a young son named Payne. Madison embraced the quiet life of the plantation, but it didn't last. In 1801, his old friend Thomas Jefferson, now president, called him back to public service, this time as Secretary of State. Madison played a key role in the Louisiana Purchase and supported the Lewis and Clark expedition. Yet the seas brought more trouble than the land. British and French ships locked in conflict repeatedly captured American vessels. Madison responded with the Embargo Act of 1807, halting U.S. trade overseas. But the law backfired, crippling American merchants and souring public opinion. Despite the unpopular embargo, Madison was elected president in 1808 with a decisive majority. But the problems he inherited were far from over. American ships remained under siege, and a new wave of aggressive politicians, the war hawks, pushed for a military response. Though hesitant, Madison saw no alternative. In 1812, the United States declared war on Great Britain. The early days of the War of 1812 were grim. The U.S. Navy was underpowered, and Madison's critics branded the conflict Mr. Madison's War. Yet he won re-election that same year, defeating New York's DeWitt Clinton. The war dragged into his second term, culminating in a devastating moment. The British stormed Washington in 1814, setting fire to the Capitol and the White House. Madison was forced to flee. The tide soon turned. U.S. forces halted further British advances in the north, and General Andrew Jackson pulled off a stunning victory at the Battle of New Orleans in early 1815. Though the battle came after the fact, it sealed the symbolic end of the war. The Treaty of Ghent, signed in late 1814, officially restored peace. Madison emerged from the presidency bruised but respected. He had endured one of the most difficult chapters in early American history, preserving the republic through war, division, and uncertainty. As both a visionary and a survivor, his legacy as the father of the Constitution was firmly cemented. After stepping down from the presidency in 1817, James Madison and his beloved wife Dolly returned once more to their peaceful Montpelier estate. Retirement, however, didn't slow Madison's restless mind. He turned his attention to shaping the nation's intellectual future, working closely with his lifelong friend, Thomas Jefferson, to establish the University of Virginia. When the university opened in 1825, Jefferson became its rector. But with Jefferson's passing the next year, Madison quietly stepped into the role, continuing their shared vision of higher education. Though largely removed from the political spotlight, Madison wasn't finished with public life. In 1829, he agreed to serve as a delegate to Virginia's Constitutional Convention, bringing decades of experience to the table. He also remained a guiding force behind the American Colonization Society, a controversial group he helped found in 1816 alongside figures like James Monroe and Robert Finley. The society sought to establish a colony in Africa for freed slaves, a complex effort born from the evolving tensions over slavery. By 1833, Madison was serving as the organization's president, navigating the moral and political landscape of a nation still deeply divided. On June 28, 1836, James Madison passed away at Montpelier at the age of 85. True to his thoughtful nature, he left behind a final message titled "Advice to My Country," which he had instructed not to be released until after his death. In it, he urged future generations to protect the Union with unwavering commitment, warning of both overt and hidden threats to its survival. His closing words carried the gravity of a man who had devoted his life to a fragile experiment in liberty. Quote, "Let the open enemy to it be regarded as a Pandora with her box opened, and the disguised one as the serpent creeping with his deadly wiles into paradise." Though small in stature and often quiet in demeanor, Madison's intellect and vision carved out a monumental place in American history. He imagined and helped construct a government unlike any before it, anchored by individual rights, guided by checks and balances, and rooted in liberty. Nearly 2 centuries later, the foundations he laid continue to uphold the rights and freedoms Americans live by every day.